Hi, welcome to MoneyKetchup, the balance sheet of happiness. The helicopter's blades thrummed a monotonous, expensive rhythm against the slate-gray sky over Manhattan. Inside, Leo Thorne scrolled through the closing numbers on his tablet, the blue light etching lines of satisfaction onto his 48-year-old face. His hedge fund, Ethelred Capital, had just netted $1.2 billion, shorting a floundering electric vehicle company. The number was good. It was always good. But the familiar, fleeting spike in his pulse, the one that used to feel like a triumph, now registered as a mere biological tick, a decimal point shifting on a screen already overflowing with zeros. "Touchdown in 5, Mr. Thorne." The pilot's voice crackled in his headset. Leo didn't bother responding. He gazed down at the glittering spires of the city, a kingdom he'd conquered with nothing but a ruthless mind and a tolerance for other people's risk. He lived in a triplex atop the Ethelred Tower, a monument to his success that he'd commissioned and named without a hint of irony. He owned a vineyard in Tuscany, a private island in the Bahamas, and a collection of Warhols that felt less like art and more like assets. He had everything money could buy, and a cavernous, echoing silence where his soul used to be. His happiness, he had come to realize, was a meticulously managed fund itself. It was diversified, the adrenaline of the deal, high risk, diminishing returns, the admiration of sycophants, junk bonds, the temporary solace of rare scotch, a liquid asset. But the core portfolio was underperforming. Drastically, the helicopter settled onto its private pad. As he stepped out, the bitter January wind sliced through his Brunello Cucinelli coat. His assistant, Chloe, materialized at his side, a tablet of her own glowing like a sacred text. "Evening, Leo. Your 7 p.m. is here. Mr. Eris," from the Chronicle. The profile piece. Leo sighed. "The How I Built It fluff. Give me 10 minutes. And cancel the dinner with the Swiss bankers. Send apologies and a case of the 45 Latour." Of course. In his office, a sterile expanse of glass, steel, and a single, intimidating Henry Moore sculpture, a young journalist sat nervously. Ethan Eris had eager eyes and a cheap suit. Leo saw himself 30 years ago, minus the talent and plus a crippling naivete. He performed the interview on autopilot, dispensing polished sound bites about market intuition and disruptive vision. But on a personal level, Mr. Thorne, Ethan ventured, treading carefully. "Your critics say Ethelred's strategies often gut companies, cost jobs, that your wealth is built on a foundation of creative destruction. How do you reconcile that with, well, happiness?" The word hung in the air, absurd and intrusive. Leo's mask slipped for a second. "Happiness is a luxury good, Ethan. And like all luxuries, its value is subjective. My work provides capital efficiency. That is my contribution. The emotional ledger is irrelevant." Ethan blinked, scribbling furiously. The interview wound down. As the journalist left, something fell from his overstuffed bag. A small, worn, leather-bound book. Leo picked it up. It wasn't a notebook. It was a copy of The Little Prince. A childish scrawl inside the cover read, "Asterisk for my Ethan, who already knows what is essential. Love, grand, asterisk." Leo felt a strange pang, a memory of his own grandmother's cramped apartment, the smell of mothballs and oatmeal cookies. He meant to call after Ethan, but his phone buzzed. A crisis in Hong Kong. The book was forgotten on his desk. That night, in his vast, cold bedroom, sleep wouldn't come. The $1.2 billion felt like dust in his hand. He wandered into his minimalist living room. Its only personal item, a framed photo of a younger Leo with a woman laughing, her head thrown back. Clara. They'd met in college, when he was a hungry scholarship student, and she was an art history major who loved muddy dogs and bad poetry. He'd chosen the chase, the first million, the 10 million, the 100 million, over the life she wanted. The photo was 15 years old. He hadn't spoken to her in 12. He poured a drink, his eye catching the spine of The Little Prince on his desk. He opened it, scoffing at the sentimental watercolors. But a line snagged him. Asterisk, "It is only with the heart that one can see rightly. What is essential is invisible to the eye." Asterisk. "Ridiculous," he muttered, but the words echoed. What was essential to him? His algorithm for trading Brazilian commodities? His wine cellar's humidity control system? Suddenly, a wave of dizziness hit him. The room blurred. The more sculpture seemed to morph, its bronze curves twisting into a familiar, gaunt face. Leo staggered, clutching his chest, a searing pain erupting behind his ribs. Then, blackness. He awoke to sunlight. But not his sunlight. This was a watery, winter sun filtering through grimy windows onto scuffed hardwood floors. He was in a bed, but it was narrow, the sheets thin. The smell was unmistakable: stale coffee, old books, and the faint, sweet-rot scent of a city apartment building. He sat up, panic rising. This was his first apartment, the one he'd shared with Clara in Brooklyn before the money. "Leo, you're finally up." She walked in, wearing his old college sweatshirt, her hair in a messy bun. She looked exactly as she had at 25. "You were muttering about stock indexes in your sleep again." "Bad dream." He stared, his mouth dry. "Clara." "Who else?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. There was a tension there, a sadness he remembered but had long since buried. "Come on, we're going to be late for the gallery." The day unfolded in a surreal cascade of forgotten details. The cramped, buzzing gallery opening for Clara's friend, a sculptor who worked with recycled metal. The cheap, surprisingly good wine. The passionate, impractical arguments about art and meaning. Leo, in his younger body but with his older mind, felt like a ghost. He watched his younger self, ambitious, already impatient, subtly checking his beeper, a beeper, for financial updates. He saw the way Clara's face lit up when she talked about a community mural project, and the way his younger self's eyes glazed over. That night, over spaghetti in their tiny kitchen, Clara said softly, "The offer from Hartwell Partners, you're going to take it, aren't you?" Young Leo's face hardened with ambition. "It's $70,000 a year, Clara. A start. It's what we need." "What we need?" she asked, her voice fragile. "Leo, last week you said our happiness was right here. That this," she gestured to the chipped plates, the crack in the ceiling, "was the real work." He watched himself reach for her hand, but it was a negotiator's gesture. "This is the work. The groundwork. This is how we build a future where you can have a studio, and we can have security. Real happiness takes capital." The memory was a physical blow. He, the ghost in his own past, wanted to scream. Asterisk no. Listen to her. This is the happiness. The crack in the ceiling, the bad wine, her hand in yours. Asterisk, but he was just a spectator. He saw the hope die in Clara's eyes, replaced by a quiet, devastating understanding. The essential had just been rendered invisible, traded for a future of visible, tangible things. The scene dissolved into swirling darkness. He came to on a polished marble floor. The air was thick with the scent of gardenias and money. His penthouse. But the silence was deafening. It was his 40th birthday party, a legendary affair he'd thrown for himself. Ice sculptures melted into vintage Dom Perignon. A-list celebrities mingled with power brokers. A jazz quartet played something tasteful and expensive. Leo saw himself, older, sharper, in a Brioni tuxedo, holding court by the floor-to-ceiling window. He was narrating the story of a recent hostile takeover, the punchline being the bankruptcy of a family-owned supplier. The circle around him laughed, a brittle, performative sound. His wife, Sloane, a former model turned art patron with the warmth of a marble statue, stood beside him, her smile a perfect, vacant accessory. The ghost Leo wandered through the party. He heard snippets, leverage to the hilt, divorce settlement, his third yacht. Can you believe it? The conversations were transactions. The laughter was currency. In a quiet corner, he saw his then COO, David, a man he'd considered a friend, on the phone. "No, he's completely insulated. Doesn't see the morale issue. Just keep the numbers up through the quarter, then we jump ship." The ghost Leo felt a profound loneliness, colder than the ice sculptures. He approached his 40-year-old self, who was momentarily alone, looking out at the city. For a second, the mask dropped. The man looked tired, empty. He pulled a phone from his pocket and stared at it. He opened a photo, an old, grainy picture of him and Clara laughing on a beach. His thumb hovered over the screen, a universe of regret in the gesture. Then Sloane's voice cut through the air. "Leo, darling, the minister is here." The mask snapped back on. The phone vanished, and the man turned, all gleaming teeth and calculated charm. The ghost understood. This was the happiness of the present he'd chosen. A gilded cage of his own design. The essential, connection, authenticity, love, had been priced out of the market. The darkness returned, but this time it was frantic, accompanied by the sound of frantic beeping and hushed, urgent voices. He was in a hospital bed. Tubes snaked from his arms. The light was harsh. An older, weary-faced doctor was speaking to a familiar figure. Chloe, his assistant, now looking strained and professional. Massive myocardial infarction. We've stabilized him, but the damage is significant. He's extremely vulnerable. The stress, the lifestyle, the doctor said. What are his chances? Chloe asked, not as an employee, but with a surprising depth of concern. With rest, a complete change maybe, but he has to want it. Does he have family? Anyone? Chloe's silence was answer enough. There's a Mrs. Thorne. They've been separated for 2 years. She's in Gushtad. I've called. Is his instructions in the file list Ethelred's board as next of kin for medical decisions? The ghost Leo felt a chill that had nothing to do with the hospital air. His life, distilled to a corporate flowchart. He was forced to watch the days that followed. The get-well cards from business associates were generic, likely chosen by their own assistants. The board met in a hushed conference call, their primary concern being stock volatility. Flowers arrived in grotesque, expensive bouquets that did nothing to mask the antiseptic smell of mortality. Then, on the third day, a solitary figure entered. Ethan Eris, the journalist. He carried no flowers, just a small paper bag. He looked awkwardly at the unconscious Leo in the bed. I came to return your pen. You left it at the interview. He placed a Mont Blanc on the side table. And I brought you this. From the bag, he pulled out a second copy of The Little Prince, new. My grandma's philosophy. She said hospitals need stories more than medicine sometimes. He hesitated, then added, almost to himself, I quit the Chronicle. Taking a job at a small paper upstate. Going to try writing about people, not portfolios. Your interview, it helped me decide. So, thanks I guess. He left as quietly as he came. The simplicity of the gesture, its utter lack of transactional value, hung in the sterile room like a revolution. Leo Thorne woke up in his actual bed, in his penthouse, gasping. The dawn was just breaking, painting the sky in hues of rose and gold. The pain was gone, but a profound ache remained, an ache of truth. He was alive. The visits had been a hallucination, a fever dream born of stress, guilt, and a dying heart. But they were truer than any annual report. For the first time in decades, he didn't reach for his phone. He walked to the window and watched the city wake up. He saw the delivery bikes, the bakeries turning on lights, the slow, human rhythm of life that existed utterly independent of the Dow Jones. He acted with a speed that stunned his world. He summoned the board and announced his immediate retirement. He was divesting, personally and professionally. He established an irrevocable trust, funded with half his wealth, for employee transitions and small business grants in communities his funds had impacted. The other half, after ensuring lifetime security for a few truly loyal old staff like Chloe, would go to a foundation supporting arts education and mental health initiatives, spearheaded by people like Ethan Eris, who he tracked down and hired as a consultant. He sold the penthouse, the island, the third yacht. The Warhols went to auction, the proceeds fueling the foundation. The financial press went into a frenzy. Thorne's great capitulation, billionaire burnout or moral crisis. He gave no interviews. His final act was to board a train, a mode of travel he hadn't used in 30 years, headed for a small town in Vermont. He'd used a discreet investigator to find her. Clara had never married. She ran a community arts center from a converted old church. He stood outside in the falling snow, watching through a window as she taught a pottery class to a group of teenagers, her hands covered in clay, her laugh still the same, warm and full. The essential. He didn't go in. He wasn't here to reclaim a past he'd forfeited. He was here to witness a truth. Happiness wasn't a destination purchased by money. It was a byproduct. A byproduct of purpose, of connection, of using whatever you had, be it wealth or talent or simple kindness, to add a sliver of light to the world. He bought a small, rundown cottage on the edge of town. He learned to fix a leaky roof, to plant a garden that mostly failed, to split wood until his soft hands blistered and then calloused. He volunteered at Clara's center, not as a benefactor, but as the guy who moved tables and fixed the kiln. He donated money anonymously through the foundation. He and Clara never rekindled their romance. That river had flowed on, but they forged a gentle, deep friendship. He was just Leo to her now, not a billionaire, not a financier, just a man trying to figure out how to be human. One evening, a year later, he sat on his porch with Ethan, who was visiting. The foundation was funding a local journalism initiative. They drank cheap beer as the fireflies blinked over his wild, weedy garden. "You ever miss it?" Ethan asked, gesturing vaguely toward the distant world of high finance. "The power? The game?" Leo looked at his hands, no longer manicured but strong from real work. He thought of the quarterly reports from his foundation, a school art program saved here, a dozen jobs created there, a quiet grant that kept a family farm afloat. The numbers were small, insignificant on his old balance sheet. He thought of the exhaustion that now came from physical labor, not psychic stress. He thought of the taste of a tomato he'd grown himself, the sound of Clara's laughter from down the road, the satisfaction of a kiln firing perfectly because he'd fixed the wiring. "I traded a mountain of gold for a handful of seeds, Ethan," Leo said, his voice quiet. "For years, I thought the gold was the point. But the gold was cold. It was just weight. These seeds," he looked out at the messy, thriving, imperfect life around him. "They're growing. And that," he said, a genuine, uncalculated smile finally reaching his eyes, "is the only yield that ever really mattered." The balance sheet of his life had been reset. The assets were no longer listed in dollars, but in moments of meaning. The liabilities, the loneliness, the emptiness, were being paid down, day by simple day. He was far from rich, and perhaps not perpetually happy in the bubbly sense. But he was, for the first time since he was a young man in a cramped apartment with a woman he loved, content. And in the quiet economy of the human heart, he had finally discovered content was the highest dividend of all. Do like and subscribe my channel.